Hello, welcome to the Rosthern Museum and Mennonite Interpretive Center, Christmas by Lamplight. We're glad you joined us. Before COVID-19, of course, the museum hosted Christmas by Lamplight in person in the little church on the corner of 6th Avenue and 5th Street in Rosthern. Those evenings featured carol singing and storytelling to warm the heart, and hot chocolate and pepper nuts to warm the body. We can't offer you hot chocolate and pepper nuts at this event, but you're welcome to pause the video and get yourself a hot drink and some Christmas treats. And now I invite you to settle back into your favorite chair and enjoy Christmas by Lamplight.
This is an excerpt from To Everything There Is a Season by Alistair MacLeod. I was 11 and lived with my family on our small farm on the west coast of Cape Breton. My family had been there for a long, long time, and so it seemed that I. And much of that time seems like the proverbial yesterday. Yet when I speak on this Christmas 1977, I'm not sure how much I speak with the voice of that time or how much in the voice of what I have since become. And I'm not sure how many liberties I may be taking with the boy I think I was. For Christmas is a time of both past and present, and often the two are imperfectly blended. As we stepped into its newness, we often look behind. We have been waiting now, it seems, forever. Actually, it's been most intense since Halloween, when the first snow fell upon us as we moved like muffled mummers upon darkened country roads. The large flakes were soft and new then, and almost generous, and the earth to which they fell was still warm and yet unfrozen. They fell in silence and into the puddles and into the sea, where they disappeared the moment they of contact. They disappeared, too, upon touching the heated redness of our necks and hands or the faces of those who did not wear masks. We carried our pillowcases from house to house, knocking on doors to become silhouettes in the light thrown out from kitchens, white pillowcases held out by whitened forms. The snow fell between us and the doors and was transformed in the shimmering golden beams. And when we turned to leave, it fell on our footprints, and as the night wore on, obliterated them, and all the records of our movements. In the morning, everything was soft and still, and November had come upon us. My brother Kenneth, who is 2.5, is unsure of his last Christmas. It is Halloween that looms largest in his memory as an exceptional time of being up late in magic darkness and falling snow. Who are you going to dress up at Christmas? He asks. I think I'll be a snowman. All of us laugh at that and tell him Santa Claus will find him if he is good and he need not dress up at all. We go about our appointed tasks waiting for it to happen. I'm troubled myself about the nature of Santa Claus, and I'm trying to hang on to him any way that I can. It is true that at my age, I no longer really believe in him, yet I have hoped in all his possibility as fiercely as I can. Much in the same way, I think, that the drowning man waves desperately to the lights of the passing ship on the high sea's darkness. For without him, as without the man's ship, it seems our fragile lives would be just so much more desperate. My mother has been tolerant of my attempted perpetuation, perhaps because she has encountered it before. Once I overheard her speaking to my sister Anne to one of our neighbors. I thought Anne had believed forever, she said. I practically had to tell her. I have somehow always wished I had not heard her say that as I seek sanctuary and reinforcement, even in an ignorance I now dare not trust. Kenneth, however, believes with an unadulterated fervor, and so do Bruce and Barry, who are 6-year-old twins. Beyond me there is Anne, who is 13, and Mary, who is 15, both of whom seem to be leaving childhood at an alarming rate. My mother has told us that she was already married when she was 17, which is only 2 years older than Mary is now. That too seems strange to contemplate. Perhaps childhood is shorter for some than it is for others. I think of this sometimes in the evenings when we have finished our chores and the supper dishes have been cleared away, and we're supposed to be doing our homework. I glance sideways at my mother, who is always knitting or mending, at my father, who mostly sits by the stove coughing quietly with his handkerchief at his mouth. He has not been well for over 2 years and has difficulty breathing whenever he moves at more than the slowest pace. He is most sympathetic of all concerning my extended hopes and says we should hang on to the good things in our lives as long as we are able. He is old, we think, at 42. Yet Christmas, in spite of all the doubts of our different ages, is a fine and splendid time, and as now we pass the midpoint of December, our expectations are heightened by the increasing coldness that has settled down upon us. The ocean is flat and calm along the coast, and the scooped-out coves has turned to an icy slush. The brook that flows past our house is almost totally frozen, and there's only a small channel of rushing water that flows openly at its very center. When we let the cattle out to drink, we chop holes with an axe at the brook's edge so they can drink without venturing onto the ice. The sheep move in and out of their shelter, restlessly stamping their feet or huddling together in tightly packed groups. A conspiracy of wool against the cold. The hens perch high on their roosts with their feathers fluffed out about them, hardly feeling it worthwhile to descend to the floor for their few scant kernels of grain. The pig, who has little time before he is butchering, squeals his displeasure to the cold with his snout, tosses his wooden trough high in the air. And the splendid young horse paws the planking of his stall and gnaws the wooden crib work of his manger. We have put a protective barrier of spruce boughs about our kitchen door and have banked our house with additional boughs and billows of eelgrass. Still, the pail of water we leave standing in the porch is solid in the morning and has to be broken with a hammer. The clothes my mother hangs on the line are frozen almost instantly and sway and creak from their suspending clothespins like sections of dismantled robots. The stiff leg, rasping trousers, and the shirts and sweaters with unyielding arms outstretched. In the morning, we raced from our frigid upstairs bedrooms to finish dressing around the kitchen stove. We would extend our coldness half a continent away to the Great Lakes of Ontario so that it might hasten the Christmas coming of my eldest brother, Neil. He is 19 and employed on the lake boats, the long, flat carriers of grain and iron ore whose season ends any day after December 10th, depending on ice conditions. We wish it to be cold on the Great Lakes of Ontario, so that he may come home to us as soon as possible. Already his cartons have arrived. They come from different places: Cobourg, Toronto, St. Catharines, Welland, Windsor, Sarnia, Sault Ste. Marie. The days go by in fevered slowness until finally on the morning of December 23rd, a strange car rolls by into our yard. My mother touches her hand to her lips and whispers, "Thank God." My father gets up steadily from his chair to look through the window. Our golden older brother is here at last. He is here with his reddish hair and beard, and we can hear his hearty laugh. He will be happy and strong and confident for us all. There are 3 other young men with him who look much the same as he. They too are from the boats and are trying to get home to Newfoundland. My father pours them drinks of rum, and my mother takes out her mincemeat and fruit cakes she has been hoarding. In the kitchen's warmth, the young men begin to nod and doze, their heads drooping suddenly to their chests. They nudge each other with their feet in an attempt to keep awake. They will not stay and rest because they have come so far, and tomorrow is Christmas Eve, and stretches of mountains and water still lie between them and those they love. After they leave, we pounce upon our brother physically and verbally. He laughs and shouts and lifts us over his head and swings us in his muscular arms. We fall over one another in the excitement of decoration. That night, bundled in hay and voluminous coats and heated stones at our feet, we start upon our journey. Our parents and Kenneth remain at home, but all the rest of us go. Before we leave, we feed the cattle and sheep and even the pig all that they can eat, so they will be contented on Christmas Eve. Our parents wave to us from the doorway. At first, the horse is wild with excitement and lack of exercise. Later, he settles down to a trot, and still later, a walk as the mountain rises before him. We sing all the Christmas songs we know and watch for the rabbits and foxes scudding across open patches of snow and listen to the drumming of partridge wings. We are never cold. The church is very beautiful at night with its festooned branches and glowing candles and the booming, joyous sounds that come from the choir loft. On the way home, we listen to the creak of the leather harness and the hiss of runners on the snow and begin to think of presents. The snow from the horses' hooves falls about our heads like whiteness of the stars. After supper, it's time for the younger children to be in bed. But tonight, my father says to me, "Would you like to stay up with us?" And so I stay quietly with the older members of my family. When all is silent upstairs, Neil brings the cartons that contain his clothes and begins to open them. The boxes are filled with gifts neatly wrapped and bearing tags. The ones for my younger brother say, "From Santa Claus," but mine are not among them. As I know with certainty they never will be again. Yet I'm not so much surprised as touched by a pang of loss at being here on the adult side of the world. I look at my parents drawn together before the Christmas tree. My mother has her hand upon my father's shoulder, and he is holding his ever-present handkerchief. I look at my sisters who have crossed this threshold ahead of me and now journey each day farther from the lives they knew as girls. I look at my magic older brother who has come to us this Christmas from half a continent away, bringing everything he has and is. All of them. All of them are captured in the tableau of their care. Every man moves on, my father says quietly. And I think he speaks of Santa Claus, but there is no need to grieve, he continues. He leaves good things behind.
Hark the Hairy Angels by Robert Fulghum. A Sunday afternoon it was, some days before Christmas, with rain, with wind, with cold, winter gloom. Things to-do list was long and growing like an unresistant mold. Temper short, bioindex negative, horoscope reading suggested caution. And this Sunday paper suggested dollars, death, and destruction as the day's litany. Oh, tidings of comfort and joy. Fa la 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 la. This holy day of Lord's Day bliss was jarred by a pounding at the door. Now what? Deep sigh, opening it, resigned to accept whatever bad news lies in wait. I am nonplussed. A rather small person in a cheap Santa Claus mask, carrying a large brown paper bag out thrust. Trick or treat! Santa Mask shouts. What? Trick or treat! Santa Mask hoots again. Tongue-tied, I stare at this apparition, and he shakes the bag at me, and dumbly I fish into my wallet, and I find $1, and I drop it into the bag, and the mask lifts, and an Asian kid with a $10 grin taking up most of his face pops out. Want to hear some caroling? He says in a sing-song English. I know him now. He belongs to a family settled into the neighborhood by the Quakers last year. Boat people, Vietnamese, I believe, refugees. He stopped by at Halloween with his sisters and brothers, and I filled their bags. Hong Duck is his name, and he's maybe 8. At Halloween, he looked like a wise man with a bathrobe on and a dish towel around his head. Want to hear some caroling? I nod, envisioning an octet of urchin refugees hiding in the bushes, ready to join their leader. Sure, where's the choir? I'm it, he says, and he launches forth with this up-tempo chorus of jingle bells at full lung power. I'm it, he says, and he launches forth with an up-tempo chorus of jingle bells at full lung power. This was followed by an equally enthusiastic rendering of what I swear sounded like Hark the Hairy Angels Sing. And finally, a soft voice, reverential singing of Silent Night. Head back, eyes closed, from the bottom of his heart, he poured out the last strains of Sleep in Heavenly Peace into the gathering night. Wet-eyed, dumbstruck by his performance, I pulled a $5 bill out of my wallet and dropped that into his paper bag. In return, he produced half a candy cane from his pocket and passed it to me solemnly. And then, flashing that $10 grin, he turned and ran from the porch shouting, "God bless you!" and "Trick or treat!" And he was gone. Who was that masked kid? Hung Doc, the one-man choir delivering Christmas door to door. Now, I confess I am usually a little confused by Christmas. It never made a lot of sense to me. It's unreal. Ever since I got the word about Santa Claus, I've been a closet cynic at heart. Singing about riding in a one-horse sleigh is ludicrous. I've never seen one, much less ridden in one. I've never roasted chestnuts on an open fire. I wouldn't know how to if I had one, and, well, I've heard they're no big deal anyway. Wandering wise men raise my suspicions, and shepherds who spend their lives hanging about with sheep are a little strange. Never seen an angel either, and my experience with virgins is really limited. The appearance of a newborn king doesn't interest me. I'd just as soon settle for some other president. Babies and reindeers stink. I know that. I've been around both of them. And the little town of Bethlehem, well, it's a pit, according to those who've been there. Singing about things I've never seen or done or wanted, dreaming of a white Christmas that I've never known. Christmas isn't very real. And yet, I am too old to believe in it, and too young to give up on it, and too cynical to get into it, and too needy to stay out of it. Trick or treat. After I shut the door came hysteria, laughter, tears, and that funny feeling you get when you know that once again Christmas has come to you. Right down the chimney of my midwinter hovel comes Saint Hong Duck. He's confused about the details like me, but he's very clear on the spirit of the season. It's an excuse to let go and celebrate, to throw yourself into the holiday with all you have, wherever you are. I'm it, says he. Where's Christmas? I ask myself. I'm it, comes the echo. I'm it. Head back, eyes closed, voice raised, in whatever song I can muster the courage to sing. God, it is said, once sent a child upon a starry night that the world might know joy and hope. I'm not sure that I quite believe that, or that I believe in all the baggage that's been heaped on that story for the last 2,000 years. But I am sure that I believe in Hong Duck, the one-man Christmas choir shouting, "Trick or treat!" door to door. I don't know who or what sent him, but I know I am tricked through the whimsical mischief of fate into joining the choir that sings of joy and hope. Through a child, I have been treated.
We have heard on high, sweetly singing o'er the plains, and the mountains in reply echo back their joyous strains. Glory
Christ Climbed Down by Lawrence Ferlinghetti. Christ climbed down from his bare tree this year and ran away to where no rootless Christmas trees hung with candy canes and breakable stars. Christ climbed down from his bare tree this year and ran away to where no gilded Christmas trees and no tinsel Christmas trees and no tinfoil Christmas trees and no pink plastic Christmas trees and no gold Christmas trees and no black Christmas trees and no powder blue Christmas trees hung with electric candles and encircled by tin electric trains and clever cornball relatives. Christ climbed down from his bare tree this year and ran away to where no intrepid Bible salesman covered the territory in two-tone Cadillacs, and where no Sears Roebuck crushes complete with plastic babe in the manger arrived by parcel post, the babe by special delivery, and where no televised wise men praised the Lord Calvert whiskey. Christ climbed down from his bare tree this year and ran away to where no fat, hand-shaking stranger in a red flannel suit and a fake white beard went around passing himself off as some sort of North Pole saint, crossing the desert to Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, in a Volkswagen sled drawn by rollicking Adirondack reindeer, and German names, and bearing sacks of humble gifts from Saks Fifth Avenue for everybody's imagined Christ child. Christ climbed down from his bare tree this year and ran away to where no Bing Crosby carolers groaned of a tight Christmas, and where no Radio City angels ice-skated wingless through a winter wonderland into a jingle bell heaven daily at 8:30 with midnight mass matinees. Christ climbed down from his bare tree this year and softly stole away into some anonymous Mary's womb again, where in the darkest night of everybody's anonymous soul he awaits again. An unimaginable and impossibly immaculate reconception, the very craziest of second comings.
This is an excerpt from a book called Cider with Rosie by Laurie Lee. It's a classic turn-of-the-century story about a Welsh boy coming of age. This week before Christmas, when snow seemed to lie thickest, was the moment for carol singing. And when I think back those nights, it is to the crunch of snow and the lights of the lanterns on it. Carol singing in my village was a special tithe for boys. The girls had little to do with it. Like haymaking and blackberrying and stone clearing and wishing people a happy Easter, it was one of our seasonal perks. By instinct, we knew just when to begin. A day too soon, and you should have been unwelcome. A day too late, and you would have received lean looks from people whose bounty had already been exhausted. When the true moment came exactly balanced, we recognized it, and we were ready. So, as soon as the wood had been stacked in the oven to dry for the morning, we put on our scarves and went out through the streets, calling loudly between our hands to each other, till the various boys who knew the signal came together from their houses to join us. One by one, they came stumbling through the snow, swinging their lanterns around their heads, shouting and coughing horribly. "Come carol barkin' then!" We were the church choir. So no answer was necessary. For a year, we praised the Lord, out of key. And as a reward for our service, on top of the outing, we now had the right to visit all of the big houses, to sing our carols, and collect our tithe. To work them all, it meant a 5-mile journey on foot over wild and generally snowed up country. So the first thing we did, let me do that again. To work them all meant a 5-mile foot journey over wild and generally snowed up country. So the first thing we did was to plan our route, a formality because the route never changed. All the same, we blew on our fingers and argued, and then we chose our leader. This was not binding, for we all fancied ourselves to be leaders, and he who started the night in that position usually trailed home with a bloody nose. 8 of us set out that night. There was Sixpence, the tanner, who had never sung in his life. He just worked his mouth in church. And the brothers, Horace and Boney, they were always fighting everybody and always getting the worst of it. And then there was Clergy Green, the preaching maniac, Waite the bully, and my 2 brothers. And as we went down the lane, other boys from other villages were already up in the hills singing King Wenchlish and shouting through keyholes, "Knock on the knocker, ring at the bell, give us a penny for singing so well." But they weren't an approved charity, for we were the choir. But competition was in the air. Our first call, as usual, was at the house of the squire, and so we trooped nervously down his drive. For light, we had candles in marmalade jars that were suspended in loops of string, and they threw pale gleams onto the towering snowdrifts that stood on each side of the drive. A blizzard was blowing, but we were well wrapped in our army puttees on our legs and our woolen hats on our heads and several scarves around our ears. And so we approached the big house across the white, silent lawns, and we too grew silent and respectful. The lake near was stiff and black, and the waterfall frozen and still, and we arranged ourselves shuffling around the big door, and then knocked and announced the choir. A maid bore the tidings of our arrival deep into the echoing distances of the house, and while we waited, we cleared our throats noisily. And then she came back, and the door was left ajar for us, and we were bidden to begin. We brought no music. The carols were in our heads. "Let's give 'em Wild Shepherds," said Jack. So we began in confusion, plunging into a wreckage of keys, of different words and tempo, but gathering strength. And he who sang loudest took the rest of us with him, and the carol took shape, if not sweetness. This huge stone house with its ivied walls was always a mystery to us. What were those gables and those attics and rooms, those narrow windows that were veiled by cedar trees? So as we sang Wild Shepherds, we craned our necks and gaped into that lamplit hall which we had never entered, staring at the muskets and the chairs and the great tapestries furred by dust, until suddenly, on the stairs, we saw the old squire himself standing and listening with his head to one side. And he didn't move until we finished. And then slowly he tottered toward us and dropped 2 coins into our box. And then with a trembling hand, he scratched his name onto the book that we carried and gave us each a long look with his moist, blind eyes. And then he turned away in silence. And though, as released from a spell, we took a few sedate steps, and then we broke into a run for the gate, and we didn't stop until we were out of his grounds. And then, impatient at last to discover the extent of our bounty, we squatted by the cowsheds and held our lanterns up over the book and saw that he had written 2 shillings. 2 shillings. Now there was quite a good start. No one of any worth in the district would dare to give us less than the squire. So steadily, we worked ourselves through the length of the valley, going from house to house, visiting the lesser and the greater gentry, the farmers, the doctors, the merchants, the majors, and all of the exalted persons. We approached our last house, high on the hill, the place of Joseph, the farmer. For him, we had chosen a special carol, which was about that other Joseph. So we always felt that singing it added a certain spicy cheek to the evening. The last stretch of country to reach his farm was perhaps the most difficult of all. In these rough, bare lanes open to all of the winds, sheep were buried and wagons were lost. So huddled together, we tramped in one another's footsteps. Powdering snow blew into our screwed-up eyes, and the candles burnt low, and some blew out altogether. And we talked loudly above the gale. Crossing at last the frozen mill stream, whose wheel in summer still turned the barren mechanism, we climbed up to Joseph's farm. Sheltered by trees, warm on its bed of snow, it seemed always to be like this. As always, it was late. As always, this was our final call. The snow had a fine crust upon it, and the old trees sparkled like tinsel. We grouped ourselves around the farmhouse porch. The sky cleared, broad streams of stars ran over the valley and away to Wales, and on Slad's white slopes, seen through the black sticks of the woods around us, some red lamps still burned in windows. Everything was quiet. Everywhere there was the faint crackling silence of the winter night. And we started singing, and we were all moved by the words and the sudden trueness of our voices. Pure, very dear, and breathless we sang, "As Joseph was a-walkin', he heard an angel sing, this night shall be the birth time of Christ the heavenly King. He neither shall be borned in housen or in hall, nor in a place of paradise, but in an ox's stall." And 2,000 Christmases became real to us then. The houses, the halls, the places of paradise had all vanished. The stars were bright to guide the kings through the snow, and across the farmyard we could hear the beasts in their stalls. We were given roast apples and hot mince pies, and in our nostrils were spices like myrrh. And in our wooden box, as we headed back to the village, there were golden gifts for all.
Holy
Thank you for watching Christmas by Lamplight. If you enjoyed the program, please consider making a donation to the museum. You can donate by e-transfer to rosthernmuseum@gmail.com, or you can send a check to Rosthern Museum and Mennonite Interpretive Center, Box 116, Rosthern, Saskatchewan, S0K 3R0. In case you missed that, you'll find the information at the bottom of the screen. We'd also love it if you would share this video with your friends and your family. It's time for thank yous, especially to Larry Epp and Cameron Nicole for bringing Christmas to life through verse and story. Thank you to Cheryl Rickman for playing the pump organ and assembling the quartet. Thank you to Todd Hansen, Sandy Hildebrandt, Bev Jansen, and Ted Jansen for singing. And a special thank you to our technical team of Judith Schultz and Micah Elgard, without whose talents and hard work you wouldn't be watching this program. My name is George Epp. On behalf of the Rosthern Museum and Mennonite Interpretive Center's Board of Directors, I'd like to wish you a very Merry Christmas and a healthy and happy New Year.